purpose is a good guiding light no matter anything you do. And also embracing that we're going to have different chapters in our life. So that purpose might evolve too. And I think being curious and listening to that and being open to that journey and not so static and attached to one definition was a big, I think, consistent learning for everybody.
Welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host, Dr. Cynthia. With over 30 years in the corporate world as a single mom, cancer survivor, and often the only woman in the C-suite, I understand the balancing act high-achieving women face. Now an executive coach and international speaker, my mission is to embolden every woman in the C-suite or on the rise to claim her agency and challenge the norms holding her back. Tailored for ambitious professional women, this show features candid conversations with powerful business leaders sharing their real stories of success and failure. If you're ready to look up and step up, you're in the right place. Join us and invest in your future today. Hello and welcome back. I'm your coach and your host, Dr. Cynthia. What does it take to stop a high-achieving woman in her tracks? For most of us, the honest answer is a crisis. Not a nudge, not a quiet knowing, a crisis. My guest today is someone who built an award-winning company that was acquired, then built again, and acquired again. She was a Wall Street executive before that. She's been to South by Southwest and the Vogue Business Summit and the World Retail Congress. Women's Wear Daily named her one of the 25 most influential women leaders. And then, in the middle of the night, her body said, enough. Emergency surgery, a forced stillness she had never allowed herself. And out of that stillness came her second book, The Purpose Pivot, How Dynamic Leaders Put Vulnerability and Intuition into action. It is one of the most important books I have read on what it actually costs a woman to keep drifting past the signals she's been ignoring. Welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel, Melissa Gonzalez. Nice to have
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love the title of the book, and I love that you accidentally said the word intentional,
Yes,
because I was like, that is also right,
it
the the
is.
the perspective about being more intentional and all the things that we do.
100%. It's my thought leadership is all baked in intention. So it's so
Yes.
habit forming to say it, but it's also the thing I think we struggle the most with. And I know we're going to get into that in a lot of different ways. I should let the woman listening know I discovered Melissa. I was so excited. I had read an article that you had written, and I was so touched by your story and your background and now what you're doing with that lived experience, that I reached out and you were gracious enough to say, yes, let's do this. So
Yeah.
really excited to
Yeah.
have you. So
Yes.
let's start there. There was a lot going on. You've been extremely successful, ambitious, driven. Everything from the outside, I'm sure, looked easy to others that were on the outside looking at you. But something really critical happened. Take us back to that night and what you learned, big picture in that moment before we dig into the details.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I had kind of my crucible moment early 2024 when life stopped me in my tracks due to a medical emergency that I had to embark on. But it was really after over a year of my body sending me signals and me knowing that and me talking about it with others and me writing down about it, but not really making it my top priority
Mm.
until the world stepped in and it was like, well, this is your priority now. And so it was a really piercing reminder about our body sends us signals, and we make a choice about how we listen to them and deal with them. And I've never had something be so on the nose where I actually wrote down at the end of the year that I wanted to do this Better You challenge. I wanted to focus on better gut health. I was going to start this challenge on January 10th. And it was January 10th to the date where I was woken up out of my sleep in excruciating pain and taken to the hospital to be told I had to go into emergency surgery for my gut.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, well, uh, the universe answered me. Very and
Huge.
that's right? And
Yeah.
then when I started to share it and people would reach out to tell me, "I'm glad you're okay," and, you know, so many starting to share their stories with me in ways that they hadn't shared with others. But then saying, "And the reason I hadn't shared was because I don't want anybody to think I'm weak." And
Mm,
that was really the moment where I felt we need to dispel this myth
right.
that these are moments of weakness. I think takes incredible strength to prioritize yourself, and we learn so much in these moments, but we shouldn't have to get to a point where we have a crucible moment to really realize that. And so through sharing of my experience and dozens of others and varying degrees, right, of their relationship with this topic, we can learn from each other and make better decisions and have more sustainable success in the long
Right.
run.
It's interesting. So the word signal is a word that I use in my stop drifting framework is that first listen to the signals. What is showing
Yeah.
up and our body tells on us, right? Our body keeps score, which you mentioned as
Yes.
well. What were some of the signals? I'm fascinated, by the way,
Yeah,
regardless of
sure.
wherever one's belief system is, the fact that the universe had a bigger plan. It was like shaking you into reality. But what were the signals even leading up before it reached a point where it was like this might be a health issue? What were the things that the woman listening should be paying attention to that we are often ignoring?
Yes. So by the time your body is feeling any physical ailments on the outside, so much has happened on the inside. So some of the things that I had was just growing frequency of I had a bulging disc in my neck. I was clenching my jaws all the time. Um, I had my first experience with shingles. I in my 40s, right? And so it was
Mm,
relatively young to have that. And then and I could go week after week without a bowel movement. So there was a lot of things that really have an affiliation with your body and stress.
mhm.
And I think most of us still underestimate the significant correlation between stress and disease, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
one of the top contributors, and we don't take it as seriously as we could, and that there's so many ways about the way in which we live that exacerbates the stress, elevated levels of stress for sustained periods of time for our body to uphold. And it's not meant to do that. So
Sure.
if you're highly ambitious, you might thrive in, I think it was the founder of Poppy said, like, some people, thrive in chaos and stuff. And you might, like, we all have also different tendencies, personalities, etc. But even within that, even living in success, in chaos, in adrenaline, all of that, there's still got to be a healthy approach to it
Mhm.
because our bodies were meant and designed to live in a constant fight or fight mode. So there's a difference between good adrenaline and the
Mhm.
things that release dopamine and all the positive, right? Versus living in that state of fight that
Right.
we confuse with flight, and you're releasing the negative toxins into your body. And so
Mhm.
I think it's really giving yourself the permission to pause and challenge yourself sometimes and make sure that that elevated state you're living in is actually a positive state, because it could
Mhm.
feel like it fuels you in the moment, but if you're always feeling depleted, if you're feeling at the end of the day like, what did I achieve? If you feel dissatisfied in all of it, then you're probably living more in busyness than you are living in impact. And that's not as satisfying. It just
Right.
isn't. And so it's really like it it made me more aware of asking myself those questions. And I think through my conversations over the past few months, I think it makes a lot of people aware about
Mhm.
seeing that difference.
Yeah, you said something that is so important for the person listening and a relatable story. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 41 and no hereditary, no,
Hmm.
BRCA genes, et cetera. Very early onset would that at that age. it's today, all these years, almost 18 years later, that I realize how much stress was the likely contributor, right? I was
Mm,
struggling in my marriage. I was raising 2 kids. I was in a very demanding career. I was traveling a lot. I was pouring
mm,
myself into lots of different places. And and it's only been in the last few years that as I've learned more about the research, as the research has gotten clearer about the impact of stress on the body, so I think that's so important for the person listening, not only to listen to the signals, but this notion of that ongoing chaos, that ongoing stress starts to erode parts of you before the signs and signals may even
yeah.
show up. Yeah. So
Yeah.
prevention is really critical here, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. It is. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious, right? But it's like
Right.
it takes a formula so that you
Yes.
can do it in a sustainable way.
Right, right. We talked about just at the onset, you describe intuition. Intention, we've said is also important, but you describe intuition specifically as a leadership tool in the
Mhm.
purpose pivot. Um, I feel like women in particular are trained and conditioned to override intuition. I know
Sure.
my experience as an executive, and I'd be curious about if you relate to this, was show up with my brain, right? Show up with facts and data and my alphabet soup at the end of my name, and that will make me as credible as the men in the room,
Yeah.
and denying that sort of that gut. Say more about how you intentionally chose intuition in the
Mhm.
titling and what that means to you.
Yes. So, I 100% think that all women should realize that intuition is a superpower. I
Mm,
no offense to the male counterpart,
sure.
but our ability to be in tune with our body, think about what we go through every month for most of our lives. Like there
Right.
are so many changes that are always happening, signals that are always happening. Our innate ability to know when our period's coming, our innate ability to, if we choose to, create a human. Like there's
Mhm.
so many things, and um, that just I think what differentiates us, and
Sure.
we need to trust that that's a superpower. I think that even more than ever, living in a world of AI, where there are tools that can build upon quantitative data sets, that qualitative ability is also a key differentiator, right? It's not just being able to have data at hand that spits back out with you that factually looks correct. What is the context around that data? What are the lived experiences that you can add to that data? You know, those gut checks that we get, those reactions that we get is in response to a lived experience.
Mm.
There's a differentiation between, PTSD and lived experience too, which is a whole other topic. But on average, I've seen that before. Maybe we're going to do it a little bit differently. I've seen it be successful. I've seen it not be successful. These are the variables we should also account for. Did we also challenge this? Those are the areas that are additive
Mhm.
to the quantitative side of the equation. And I think more and more, especially as AI comes to the forefront, it's going to become more critical.
Couldn't agree with you more, and I think, I've talked about that as well as being a superpower, particularly of women, that which has long been described as soft skills coming from way back when I was in training
Yeah,
and development, always bothered me that it didn't have a better name than soft skills,
sure.
and yes, today it's going to be those kinds of not only our intuition, but that ability to relate, to think conceptually, qualitatively, et cetera, are going to be the
Hmm.
differentiators, because
Yes.
the technology is not replacing what makes us uniquely human on any
No,
level. Yeah, I
no.
would 100% agree. When you think about, the purpose pivot, your book, the other word that struck me, not surprised me, but struck me was vulnerability. And you
Hmm.
sort of touched on this at the beginning about how it takes a level of not pushing through, not having to wear sort of the cape and talk a little bit more about how vulnerability showed up for you and how that maybe changed your own mindset about what that means.
Yeah, well, you can't be more vulnerable than calling your colleague in the middle of the night while you're in your pajamas, curled on a ball in the middle of the floor in
Yeah.
excruciating pain to come help you. It was a new kind of bonding for sure. And
Yes.
my husband's across the country and she's sitting in the room while the surgeon is like drawing pictures of my colon, trying to understand my options. And she's note taking and, like,
Wow.
you
Yes.
just that's life. Like, that is life. And, you realize that you can't bring your whole self to anything if you're not also vulnerable. And
Right.
there's an appropriate amount of sharing in any environment, and there's an
Mhm.
inappropriate amount, of course. But if your guiding light is, I can't share that because I can't look like I'm weak, then I think that's a failure because I do think that bringing your human side to everything you do is a strength. I think it gives a lot of people around you the permission to know that they can come to you for difficult conversations. They can come to you when they need advice. They can come to you when they see a gap in things and know that you are somebody that they can have a conversation with. If
Right.
you're always behind that, like, armor of steel and perfection and you're unpenetratable, then I don't think you get the best out of others because they think like, "Oh, she'll think less than me if I go to her with this," right? So, I think it changes the dynamic of your relationship with your peers, with the people that you manage, with your family, if you're a parent, if you're a all the different elements and dynamics of relationships that exist. Um, and I think we've been taught for so long that if you show any of those signs, that means you can't do it.
Right.
But I think, especially living in a world now where with social media and so much more transparency out there, that I think it goes a much longer way than people realize.
I agree, and I particularly wanna point that out for the younger, ambitious woman that may be listening because I feel like that conditioning was so real. I can remember being told, "Don't let them see you cry." I remember going through chemo and being bald and wearing my hat and still showing up and putting on the strong face, and I had somebody say to me, somebody close that I had a lot of trust in, say to me, "Cynthia, there's times where people can't read you because you're so consistent with you've got it figured out and you show up professional and all the things that one, it's a little difficult to read. And two, it does create an expectation or a perceived expectation, right? That, you know, on all levels, you're just kind of like mothering and wifing and working and doing all the
Yeah.
things. And I'm like, of course, that wasn't true. Of course, I was struggling and my marriage was falling
Yes.
apart. And, there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And it wasn't until I think later that I had more confidence in myself that I allowed myself to be more vulnerable and
Yeah.
authentic. And I wish I had understood that earlier. I think that
Mhm.
I would have been more relatable and also what a pressure off your shoulders, right?
Well, you allow not only are you seen, you allow other people to be seen. And I've had conversations with very successful senior individuals, male and female, because the book interviewed women, and that was my starting point because I wanted a commonality, even though it was different professions, different career trajectories. But so many men that have come over now say, I have a story too.
Mhm.
And I think the power of helping others be seen is significant.
Mhm.
And every time we're brave enough to share, that's what we open up for somebody else. And
Yeah.
we've learned through that experience. There might be somebody going through that, and you can give them tips to heal better. You can make them feel like you're not failing because you're not progressing. I had these bumps on the road too, because when you internalize it all by yourself, everything feels like not good enough and I'm not making the progress fast enough. But if you hear from others, like
Yes.
I have somebody in the book who I've been friends with for years, and I never knew her nickname was semicolon until half my colon was removed, and she was like, "Oh, you want to know a story?" And this is it. But
Love
But
it.
also she had so many tips on healing and the things that she did wrong and her setbacks, and it really became like a guide for me of like what not to do, not don't give myself pressure to get up too soon and start doing X, Y, and Z because I could go backwards and like I didn't want to. And um it just changed my perspective on a lot of my healing journey. And that was really
Mm,
meaningful. And she gave that to me by being vulnerable.
yeah, which is such a gift, and it allows not only everyone others to be feel seen, but that if you've been through this and this is your reality and, you've come out on the other side of it, A, how can I prevent it? Or B, how do I stop it sooner? Or it doesn't make me a failure because this happened to me. That I
Right.
ultimately, didn't have a choice and now I'm in this situation. And instead of seeing that as a failure, or I should have discovered it sooner, it's, you know what? It's it's life, and we've all experienced different things, and we can learn from those things. I love the fact that you interviewed, 35 female executives from just all over. What was the theme, or what was the through line of those 35 individuals?
Sure. So in the beginning, I started with women who had significant medical experiences like myself, different ones, and that was the first layer. And then through those conversations, I would get introduced to somebody else. And some were more quotes and some were full on stories. And it depended where I was at in my research of what I was trying to verify or further support. So it's a mix of women who, again, had significant medical um, situations, some that had, and then I wanted nutritionists, fitness, and that perspective, doctors as well. And then all successful in their own right. And so sharing their learnings as they've gone through their career journeys and their relationship of realizing that success will have cost, but really success that costs you yourself is too expensive.
Mm,
So, how do you put well-being as the infrastructure of your success so that you do it in a sustainable way? And so they all had different learnings along their journeys that they shared. And so it became kind of a very natural thing because after the first 10, it was like introduction after introduction. So it became pretty fluid. And
great.
really, sometimes I would have an outline in a chapter I thought I was written, and then I'd get out of an interview and be like, oh, okay. Rewriting this chapter and it
Yes.
taking a new shape. And there were some that really became full on inspirations for a chapter. So it's a varying
Yes.
degree, but an amazing journey to be able to go through all those conversations.
Oh, I can appreciate that. We, Kimberly Rath and I, and in our first book, Now Near Next, did the same. We interviewed women around the globe. Um, was there a universal theme among all of the women who were sharing their health stories? Was the theme around success has a cost, or what was the one sort of consistent?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think people recognize that. I think that a consistent, it was all a little bit different, but I would say purpose, hence the title,
Okay.
really was the consistent part.
Yeah.
Purpose is a good guiding light no matter anything you do. And
Yeah.
also embracing that we're going to have different chapters in our life. So that purpose might evolve too. And I think being curious and listening to that and being open to that journey and not so static and attached to one definition was a
Mm.
big, I think, consistent learning for everybody.
Yeah. I want to dig into that a little more because I think that's so incredibly important to this conversation. And perhaps it leads into you talk about reprioritizing your own hierarchy of needs and
Mhm.
becoming your own vibe director. Say more about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, so at the end of the book of those worksheets, and I did the vibe director because music is such soul food for everybody.
Yes.
And so, I was actually at a resort at the time that I was like thinking of this and I was reading about music and its power. And so I just think, look, if you all have Spotify or Pandora or whatever you listen to, have this in your toolkit. Like, what is your playlist when you wanna have hype yourself, when you wanna get into a flow zone, when you want to be mellow, when you want to there are tools you have in your life that can help you evoke that frame of mind. So that's the vibe director part of it, and, for me, it's such an important tool. Everybody's gonna
Mm.
have different things. There's different worksheets in the book. Some people are gonna find it more with journaling, some peo and wanna do that in quiet. But that's what the vibe director is all about. Like, you get to be your own DJ, but but craft them now so they're in your arsenal for when you need them.
I love you get to be your own DJ. That is fantastic. Music is so huge and important in my life as well. And it's interesting not having had the previous identity around the vibe director. I've sort of been intuitively doing that to some degree.
Mm,
I have my instrumental jazz, I have my spa music, my meditation
yeah.
music, and then of course I have my workout music and my, pick
The
me up when
pump you
I'm
up
feeling
music,
blue
yes.
and my pump me up. Yeah, I love it. So for the person listening, if you don't have your be your own DJ and create that list, I think that's incredible. Let's talk about purpose. I want to go further into this idea about really understanding. I think that sometimes, and this whole segment is really around what I call purpose drift, where
Mhm.
we're so focused in some part of our life that we're so focused on our career and our potential and executing on titles and things that we forget what we really feel called to do.
Yeah.
There's lots of different times we drift in that space and we get
Mhm.
lured by something else. For the person listening that's saying, "Yeah, I'm struggling with that right now. I'm really trying to identify what is my greater purpose, what is my bigger calling beyond all this sort of noise and chaos in my life." What are the words of wisdom in terms of the steps to get clarity around that?
Yeah, so I think hearing it is the first step, and, like, congratulate yourself for that too. I think you're so hard at yourself that I need to know all the answers right now. It has to be perfect or, like, I'm failing. So number 1, that acknowledgement of that clarity is a breakthrough for you. That's step 1.
Mm.
Number 2, it allows you to start listening, right? It doesn't mean you're gonna have all the answers, but start then being more cognizant of the signal your body's sending you, right? Decoupled from the bigger message. That bigger message can get overwhelming, right? Because you're like, "Okay, then I need all the answers."
Right.
So, when is it showing up that there's a misalignment? And take note of that.
Mhm.
Is it some of the things that are living on your calendar? Every time they creep up, you're like, "This is not where I wanna be."
Right.
Is it what you're surrounding yourself with, who you're surrounding yourself with? Is it the skill set needs to get reapplied somewhere else? So it's really taking time for that observation of
Mhm.
every time the body's sending you that signal of misalignment, and write it down.
Right.
And then give yourself the opportunity to reflect on what you've written down. So I think like a month is a good time period that write it down with no judgment, free flow, then go back and reflect on it and see what it's starting to tell you.
Mhm.
And then maybe take your first step. Okay, what about that can I start to change? And give yourself the opportunity, like I said, to celebrate the success in that, you know? And what is those sayings like 1%? Not everything is going to be like a 180-degree change tomorrow. Sometimes it will,
Right.
if you think you have that clarity or you want that drastic change, but sometimes it's 1 to 2% a day. Just like, what are you changing? What are you changing each day, and what does that start to feel like? So I think it's a mix of awareness,
Mhm.
observation, and action.
Mhm.
And that observation and action is going to be this parallel relationship along the way as you create change.
Yeah. And it can be so dramatic too and life-changing. I have a woman who I connected with on LinkedIn and she's consulted me and texted me around her journey to find work, and it was so interesting after hearing about drift and the 7-minute pivot and doing the work that you talk about, which is what feels off, what is my body telling me about that, when does it show up, are there patterns, and what I'm going to do about it. She wrote me the other day that she pivoted, to use our collective phrase, to nonprofit. And
Hmm.
she had been pursuing what always was part of her resume, her CV for, her career at this point. And she suddenly allowed herself to sort of open up and pivot a little bit to doing the similar kind of work, taking her talents into another industry
Hmm.
area,
Yeah.
and was the finalist for 2 very amazing positions, both in nonprofit, and was ecstatic about the opportunity. And it was so fascinating to me because it's such an example of, I think oftentimes we lose our sense of purpose. My thought around this, I'd love your thought, that we lose our sense of purpose again because we're so in autopilot around our own expectations of what success looks like, somebody else's
Hmm.
expectations of what success like. We get on this, the hamster wheel around the next title and the next this and the next salary increase, and suddenly we're kind of like, I've reached this point in my career and this is it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I know. I think you get so tied with success and identity being so intertwined that it's hard to let go and create change because you think then I'm giving up my identity.
mhm.
We have life stages, we have different chapters. How our identity there's a part of our identity is always going to stay constant. It's who we are, it's our skill set, it's our talents and all those things. And then how it gets applied gets iterated. But you're always building off of a foundation. So each iteration isn't an abandonment of your identity.
Yes.
It's like this is the foundation of my identity. That's like my through line. And then there's going to be things that still serve you and things that don't. And that's what frees you to move on. As you were talking about that example, I'm thinking about a story I heard once that I thought was such like the purest example of why purpose matters. And it was a woman who was a housekeeper. And on the surface, you could be like, that is a person that cleans houses.
Mhm.
But to her, she was passionate about it because her purpose was this is the foundation for
Mm.
the people that I work for. And the better their foundation feels, the happier they're going to be, the better they're going to perform, the better they're going to parent. And in her mind,
Right.
it was so significant what she was contributing. And that made her job enjoyable.
Right.
That's what got her excited every day. And it was meaningful.
Yes.
And it's the ability to see that in what we do that I think then becomes our core driving force
Mhm.
and what allows us to live in elements of the day that feel much more energizing than they do depleting
Right.
because we're living our purpose.
Absolutely. If you're having to force fit a definition of purpose with what you're
Mhm.
doing, then I would call the question, maybe that's not where you should be spending your time and talent,
Maybe it's not
right?
yours, right.
Right. I mean, and to your point about chapters, I mean, I've been in situations where a situation was very fulfilling of my purpose until it wasn't.
Yep.
Leadership change, culture change within an organization, things happen and you're like, gosh, it isn't what it used to be for me.
For me, yeah.
And I've graduated and my purpose needs to go elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating. And it's interesting because I had a little rivalry on LinkedIn not that long ago. I was talking about Gen Z and how connected,
Mm.
again, not to stereotype, but in their defense, if you will, Gen Z is so tapped into wanting to work and thrive in a place that fulfills purpose. And there's
Yes.
study after study, right? And I was admiring the fact that I love that shift that generationally they want to work to live, not live to work. And in doing so, they want purpose. And a gentleman had written, work is where you get a paycheck. If you want purpose, go volunteer someplace. And I thought, this is the problem. I mean, this is the issue. It's not a either or equation. It can be a both and.
Yes. I think
Yeah,
the most successful leaders are living their purpose and they're very profitable, make a lot of money, but they know what drives them. They
that's
know
right.
what gets excited. It could be cultivating talent, it could be opening new markets, it could be growing possibility. Like those are all purpose doesn't mean philanthropy.
Right. Right. And it
Sometimes it does, but that's
sometimes
not
it does.
I think that's the confusion and kind of the what's the right t like the greenwashing of it, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't mean just that. And I do
Right.
think we need to change that perspective. Both can exist. You could live your purpose and you could be ambitious and you can make a lot of money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can live your purpose to your point, the person that was cleaning houses and creating a foundation. I remember one of the most powerful moments when I was working in healthcare is there was a big snowstorm. A lot of people couldn't get to one of our hospitals. And so it was kind of all hands on deck. They needed help. And I remember being in a business suit and I just threw a company t shirt over it to go clean patient rooms. And the pressure I felt about the fact that I'm cleaning a room that some patient's going to come into and it needs to be sanitized and healthy and all the things. It was a very high bar of accountability for me. And I'm thinking, what an amazing for individuals that do that. It's a hard, hard job. But when you understand the impact that you're having, that's huge
Right.
purpose. If you
Yes,
if you
for
aspire
sure.
and have that in mind, there's no a job too big or small. You mentioned the worksheets, which I love. I love when there's tools and action and all
Yeah.
of the things. And by the way, again, we're going to have everything in the show notes, how you get a hold of Melissa Gonzalez and where you can find her book and all of her information. If there was one exercise, one of the
Mm.
worksheets that comes to mind that you say universally, this is the one I would say go to first. Is there one that you're particularly excited about, or you think the listener should look up?
Yeah, I definitely really like the energy audit delegation list one. I feel like there's a lot of resonance about people understanding the power of understanding your calendar. And I actually just spoke to somebody today, and I love the way she kind of said it back to me was we all think of our calendar as a tool of obligation versus a tool of opportunity. And when you think about how you assess what energizes you and what depletes you, I mean, and you look at your calendar, you really get to see what are you giving space to, but also what are you crowding out.
Mhm.
And if you have those two lists, so that's how the exercise starts, writing down what energizes you and what depletes you, reflect on your day, on your week, on your month. And then you start to challenge the things that live on the deplete me list. Why are they getting space? Are they obligations or desires? Obligations and desires are not the same thing. If it's an
Mhm.
obligation, okay, we need to approach it one way, right? Can you do it better? Can you do it like less in a less complicated way, etc. But if it's a desire and it's depleting you, why are you giving it space? Are you not able to let it go? You're not able to delegate it? Have you if it's professional, do you have the team in place that could do it? How do you make that change? If it's personal, there's a different kind of reflection of why can't you let it go? And so it's really starting in that journey where it gives you very concrete things to think about and steps to take along the way to start creating change. And ideally, challenge yourself as a start. Pick one thing that you remove. You have to walk away with one thing you remove and reflect and observe on it. What did that
Mm.
open up for you and how did that feel?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one. And what I really appreciate about that too, when I talk about boundaries, we talk about this idea that we often give up the things that we love the most because we think everything has external value. So we think, everything that everybody asks of us, we perceive it to have such value
Yeah.
to them. And that if where push comes to shove on where am I going to spend my time, we give up the yoga or the reading or the whatever it is that brings us joy and is good for us to go, feed the neighbor's dog for a week instead of instead of maybe wondering, is that the best use of our time and energy and are there other
Yeah.
ways for that to get done so that I'm not giving up the things that are good for me and that I do enjoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything's an opportunity cost at the end of the day. So that's
Yes.
why there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
And so, that's the saying you either have time or you have money. And in the perfect world, you have both.
Right.
But if you have the time, you might do those things. If you have the money to buy back some of your time, then maybe some of those things you delegate by getting help. And then it opens you up to do things of higher value, higher satisfaction, higher impact.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great exercise. Before I turn the attention to the listener, what do you know now on the other side of your health emergency that you wish someone had told you earlier on?
Oof. I mean, I don't know that what they would have told me, but I think what I know now for sure is that our bodies are always talking to us.
Mm,
And when you become aware of that, you notice the patterns in it. And it, your body's not lying, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Like there is a signal that it's sending to you that's giving you an opportunity to do something differently.
Right.
And I think ignoring it over time can really build up in a negative way. And
Mhm.
I think we're taught so much about the hustle and pushing through. And so I wish that there was more conversation of the slowdown as the superpower
Yes.
because it allows you to be so much more intentional about the choices that you make.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I want to take a moment to speak directly to the person listening. Here's what I want you to hold from this conversation. Melissa said something that I think is one of the most important things a high achieving woman can hear. Your body is not the enemy, your body is the messenger. When we talk about purpose drift, that erosion of meaning that happens when you're doing everything but living for something, it rarely announces itself loudly. It whispers first. It's a fatigue you can't explain away, a resistance that you push through, a quiet knowing that something is off, which you file under, I'll deal with it later. The purpose dimension of human flourishing is where your deepest why actually lives. It's the thing that makes the long hours worth it, that makes the hard decisions clear, that makes the life you've built feel like your own. And when that dimension starts to drift, you don't always know it right away, but your body does and your gut does. And the quiet moments you keep filling with noise, they know too. The 7-minute pivot exists for exactly that reason, not to solve a crisis, to prevent one, to build the habit of asking today, right now, what is my purpose dimension telling me that I have been too busy to hear? And then, as Melissa shared with us, listen to the signals, be aware, observe, and figure out something that you can do differently that's more positively directed. And with that, I love to ask all of our guests one small thing. The person listening, they don't have to overhaul their entire life or figure out their entire purpose of their life overnight. One small intentional thing you would invite the woman listening to do today.
Well, I hinted at it. So the one thing I want you to do today is look at your calendar and pick one recurring thing that you're going to remove. Could be 30
Mm.
minutes, doesn't have to be a huge chunk of time. And then I want you to observe what that opened up for you and what that felt like. And then maybe you'll do it again.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love that. I could take 30 minutes of doom scrolling out
Yes, I mean, that's
and
the
fill it with
thing.
something else,
I
right?
mean, that steals everything when you go down those paths for sure.
Yes. I mean, I can't believe the amount of time. It's well intended. I start doing my own social media and such, but then I
Yes,
get
and then you get
sucked in.
and some of it's good, right? There's an element of
Yes.
research that's good to see what's out there and learn from it. Once that turns into an unhealthy social mirror,
Mm,
so you either doom scroll and you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore, or it sets off that signal of negative social comparison. And it's time to
sure.
get off. It is time to get
Absolutely.
off.
Absolutely. So you heard it here. Great advice from Ms. Melissa Gonzalez. Choose one thing that you can remove, a reoccurring thing you can remove from your calendar, and then observe what that opens up for you, what that feels like, what signals is your body telling you, and to your point, then maybe it allows you and encourages you and validates you to choose something else, or potentially to replace it with something that is
Mhm.
desirable and healthy and moving you in the right direction. Yeah.
Yes,
I love
exactly.
it. Melissa, thank you so much. Your story is powerful. I hate that you had to go through such a difficult crisis moment. We're all blessed that you survived and are on the other side of it and sharing your story. None of us should have to reach that breaking point if we listen to our bodies, which you talk about. If today's conversation landed for you and you recognize yourself in the signals that Melissa described, please follow her on LinkedIn, follow her on the socials, pick up a copy of her book, The Purpose Pivot. Invest in yourself and in your own human flourishing. Until next time, I've got you and you've got this. Congratulations on choosing to invest in yourself. I know your time is precious. Thank you for spending it here with me. I believe in helping you look up, step forward, and fully realizing your potential. If today's conversation resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate and comment on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share this episode with them. Let's stay connected. Visit me at dr-cynthia.com, and you can find me on all the socials at Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Until next time, remember, boldly start working on your future today.